There's a now we're recording. um, there's a QR code. Also, can send this out. Um, but it's all be on our YouTube channel. Here's the if you can scan this, um, a, a survey that we can try to CGI can get more information from y'all of how we can better serve the GIS community. Um, and that's at your leisure. It doesn't have to be now. So, like I said, this is a four-part series. Um, there's a graphic, and if you're here, you probably have seen this because you needed the link to get to the presentation. Um, Next month, we have AI, ethics, sustainability, and equity in social and collective settings. That's on June 26th. July 13th is our annual awards ceremony at the UC. Our nominations are still can get some nominations in. Closing today, probably midnight. Probably actually won't really close until Monday morning, but officially until midnight tonight to submit for awards. It's at the UC, the, right after the plenary session at Revel. And if you're there, if you're at the UC, hopefully you go to the awards event. A little about CGIA. We help with the GIS professionals, enthusiasts in the in California, sharing best practices, sharing information, sharing webinars like this one. And so it's just a great organization to get to know and learn from your fellow GIS folks. So today we have Dan Beasley, President Analytics for Networks. Dan has 30 years of experience with, I won't read it, I'll just kind of paraphrase, in the field. He's done this agentic AI, which is interesting to me, having, I guess, AIs do little tasks. And this was interesting, led up more than $1 billion in network, land-based, and software system engagements across the utility sector. That's pretty impressive. So after Dan, Steve Lindley from Sonoma County is going to talk to us about how they have defined a policy and framework for the county. So as local government should be really informative. So Dan, if you could share your screen and give us some insight, please.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much. I will share my screen here. And just as I'm doing that, it's a great pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about such an exciting topic at such an exciting time. I started in this business a long time ago. 30 years is probably not true, but I can't write a bigger number. I started as a surveyor, in kind of like the early 1980s, and was a photogrammetrist and made photogrammetry maps. And then the computers came out, and it's like, holy smokes, we can put maps in computers. That's super cool. And moved into GIS in the early 1990s. So the thing we're going to talk about today with respect to the platform that CGIA has put forth is the management aspects of it, specifically integration. We're going to kind of try and look and see where GIS is with respect to agentic AI or vice versa. And we'll give you a perspective of that as we go through this talk here. Just to kind of provide an evolutionary context, um, GIS grew in leaps and bounds in the 1990s. The client server architecture opened up. The Y2K was hanging out there. Things became very available all of a sudden. And Esri really blossomed. It really grew quickly when there were polygons. And we're going to talk a couple of times. I love that we're talking to a GIS group because my favorite thing to say about it all is there's three things we do in GIS. We do points, lines, and polygons. I just think that's super cool. And those of us on this call, we got that in common. And so the truth is, they're all very different and they're all very powerful. And working together is how we draw the value proposition of our industry. But it started, GIS did really well. Esri did really well with polygons, in the environmental space. I think that's really where we grew from, Esri grew out of. And certainly counties got involved with it and planning and cadastral and parcels, all these polygon areas. And then the utilities, that's really where I've spent most. I started in the government business in about 1990, GIS, we did E911 systems and did county cadastral projects. And that kind of grew. Really, the enterprise view is what we're going to talk about a fair amount here in my talk. And the enterprise view, multidisciplinary was an exciting term, right? Where you had counties that had the water company and the assessor, and all these people came together and built a complex enterprise GIS. And it did have points, lines, and polygons in there being used at scale, and that really was a success. But then the utilities, the line people, okay, networks of electricity fundamentally, and some gas and some communications, but they piled on. They said, "Hey, we make maps, so surely we need GIS," and that seemed to make a lot of sense. And then they said, "Oh my gosh, your GIS has a topology model and we can do tracing and find out relationships." So the operations guy said, "We need that too. So, hey, we'll extend that in there." And then it's like, "Hey, this thing, we're just going to hold all our assets and we're going to put all our assets in here." And so the asset management people said, "That's what that is." And now all of a sudden, as our lumberjack here says, one tool for many uses is kind of risky business. And it's kind of what we got in it, especially, and I'm just going to kind of not keep this point going, but it is a real problem in our electric utility people, in enterprise uses. We got a multiple, and the bottom line, what happens when we do that is we have a messed up system of record. Okay, that's one point I would like to talk about today is a system of record. And so, what is that? Let's just take a step back and talk about where GIS is. I mean, it at the end of the day, in my opinion anyway, and I think in practice, and you guys are in it every day, so you would know best, but the GIS is a repository of the information with which it's intended to operate. And it should be the go-to source for its data in there. It is kind of what a system of record should be. We talk about a gold record or the authoritative source or the best data or the source of data. That's really what GIS could be or is. And then it gets a little complicated too, because we use GIS to maintain GIS sometimes, right? We got the business of populating the record, populating the system of record. That workflow, I'm calling it in this text. And so GIS workers are in the business of maintaining the system of record. They manually collect, interpret, build, validate, synchronize data. It's the action that populates and sustains the system of record. And what we get into on complex systems is we kind of have a redundancy going on. We have certain data that's in multiple systems. And it works kind of the business unit that's in charge of that uses that system, and that's where they put their data. It may be just fine in my workstation, but a system of record needs to be fine in the enterprise. That's really where fine needs to be defined. And I promise you that of 100 leading utilities in North America, zero have a good understanding of their system of record. It's incredible. And I think our local government, for which this group is more predominantly represented, does a much better job of that. And it probably because I don't know why, but I just think you guys have a better plan on things than the utility does. But at the end of the day, where work is spread to build and populate the record and then use it, and we get split between are we working to populate it or are we using it as a tool with the system in it? And so what we see the role of agentic AI within a GIS ecosystem is it can become an execution layer. It can do some of the workflow and shift the priority of the human or the worker or the team or the resource to take a more supervisory view of quality, but more importantly, utilization. And maybe those folks have more bandwidth now to think about it from an enterprise perspective. We can all click up one click or so. So though I'm fine in my own little world here in front of my workstation, maybe I need to be a little more thoughtful about how my fine plays into the overall organizational context. And that's really where the value of the system of record occurs. So what I believe we have the future to think about here with agentic AI is relieving some of the burden of data maintenance and taking that same energy and applying it to increasing the utilization, value, and benefit of our GIS systems as a system of record. That should be our goal. Now, when we talk about an execution layer, we got our points, lines, and polygons, and everything has got a different perspective in there. When we look at polygons, we got close them, and then we want to know where they are in relationship to other things, including lines, points, and polygons. So that business of creating the polygon, closing it, and locating it is a pretty big job, right? And so agentic AI is in the business of closing that. I'm going to show a very short little a demo here of how agentic AI can work on a polygon workflow, if you will, whether that be environmental, water, water management district polygons or parcels or cadastral or planning zones or what have you. Linear work is all about what's hanging on the line. And there we have a lot of topology. We have a lot of tracing. I mean, our simple map, our Google map, our direction map has lines called street center lines where decisions have to be made where we're going to go. And so there's a ton of agentic AI workflow that can occur on a linear topology model. And I think some of that's even sort of more breakthrough, even as we cut into this industry. And then the point is probably the most or the least utilized value proposition within the GIS, because there we have on every point, at least in a network perspective, like for Polygon, we have a centroid, right? And that point owns the intelligence of the polygon. And I'm not sure what we do with that. There might be more things we can do. I promise on an electric utility, the point is a device. It's a switch. It's a recloser. It's a device that monitors voltage. It's a pole. It's a vault. It's a highly valuable asset that's got a ton of functionality with respect to the network. And so sometimes we got to redesign those, replace them. We got to connect them. And there's a lot of agentic AI opportunity workflow that can happen at a point level. So I think what we see with the if we think about agentic AI becoming an execution layer within a system of record, the flavor of the agentic tool set, the orchestration of those agents varies dramatically based on the point line or polygon nature of the work that it's doing. As I mentioned, I'm going to show a lot line adjustment that occurs. This is it's a fundamental legal description. I believe this document is a 7-page document that shows how they're adjusting a line in a polygon, and we've all seen these. And let me I want to click over and just show you how an agentic AI workflow can actually operate against a Polygon workflow like that. Let me just drop this down and bring this up. So here you can see that okay, I trust. We have parcel A, and here's the legs of that, the calls of it, if you will, where the legal description of each line is turned from text to a line in this agentic AI menu. And so there's two parcels. There's parcel A where we can see the legs and the calls here, and there's parcel B that has been brought into and adjusted. We're going to use the map view over here, so we kind of have a three-layer screen within our view that allows us to chat with the LLM and get the insight that we're looking for. And here's a question that says, what's the parcel number adjacent to the parcel we're working on? So I've moved from building a workflow into placing and using the workflow retrieval and utilization. And so here I just created that polygon split. I've created these closed parcels. I've been able to find the context for where those parcels landed within my network. I have all this at my fingertips. I can chat to it, and I can get ready to post this to my GIS, or in this case, the real workflow here is actually making a plan project for some subsequent development. So this is like a base map kind of initiative. So we get these parcels put together, we get it ready for like a plot, like a work order kind of thing, if you will. So we have a scale bar, and we can ingest it into the um, AutoCAD and that type of thing, and move it into the actual design workflow itself. So, that kind of execution at scale really frees up. I mean, that typically would take maybe, 45 minutes or an hour, depending on the gnarliness of the legal description to get it plotted. And this takes maybe a minute and a half or 2 minutes to get it instantly consumed. But it's really, as you know, for all of us that use this stuff, it's really the ongoing conversation that you can have with the data. Nested within the GIS now, we're able to augment our dialogue and understanding and interaction with our system of record. So we have this incredible opportunity to strengthen the retrieval and utilization value proposition that we have initially from the tool set itself. And so, we look at we kind of look at the agentic AI context, if you will. There's three value propositions that we believe agentic AI drives into our GIS ecosystem. And that is this thing kind of goes counterclockwise. I don't know, I probably should have thought about it a minute, but really data input is the first step, right? We got to get the data in the system and got to constantly do it. And I don't know, some of us deal with queues and long lines and backlogs and all that kind of junk. Some of us deal with bad data, and these things really hurt the confidence and effectiveness of the system of record. But nevertheless, data input's a big job. This is the one piece that we feel is clearly an opportunity to improve with agentic AI. The second piece is the quality and governance. I mean, that's sort of an overvisory piece of the data, one that we don't usually have time for, quite frankly, and we hope that the system of record has its own internal validations and structures to keep us whole. But this is an area of growth and opportunity that we can get when we free up some of our horsepower from the data input equation, and we can bring it over and become more of a quality and governance mindset. And then the real value of the system of record is the retrieval and use. That third piece of the pie is why we have this thing in the first place. And so that's where we really want to land with our value proposition and on our extra effort. And surely and certainly, agentic AI is going to contribute to some of those workflows as well. But and for the longest time, that's going to remain, our purview as the people in charge. So how do we get there from here, and for what reasons are the kind of columns on the left and right of the pie chart? And so what do we need to do to improve the situation, to tame it or to use it, depending on where you are with agentic AI? I'll be honest, I'm kind of a big fan of it, but then I was, speaking with some peers the other day, and just the long-term arc of this within humanity really bugs me. But I mean, it's outside of my pay grade, but nevertheless, we have what we have, and for the time being, it's pretty cool and very helpful. But what we got to do to take advantage of it is re-engineer the work. Re-engineer the work. That's the biggest thing we need to do. And if there's one thing we need to think about, it's that. How can I take my workflows and chop them up in a way that an agent can execute them? What's our beginning and ending points? That's really what we want to do. And we can layer those workflows out and design agentic solutions for each and every one of them, and ultimately for all of them. And so it's not about not doing work. It's about streamlining the work we have in a way that can become more modular and more automated. Um, the model itself, the GeoAI model, is really where the power is, and this is a blending of the model within the system of record itself, the data structure required, and the business rules, the placement mechanisms, the way we turn the data into a language that our business uses. All that becomes part of a GeoAI model, and once we have that, it's a great, powerful accelerator that we can use to apply to multiple workflows. Um, we've got to double down on data fields and placement quality. In other words, there's no more excuse for it not being really, really good data. But I think the biggest part in kind of blends to the last point of establishing enterprise policies is, as I said earlier, it's great when my life is right inside my system. But what happens in a lot of complex enterprises is that my system has got its own war going on with other systems in the enterprise. And we have the classic case in an electric utility is a pole is in like six different systems, and it's each one is different. So you got people who go to the asset management system, some go to the GIS, some go to the plan accounting, some go to the engineering. They're all different views. And so what is the right view for the right workflow? That's an important enterprise perspective. And then the benefits, where we are with it, is data availability. So any kind of queues and the lack of availability should end very quickly. And we can even move to like more near real time uh, data availability, depending on how your particular operation, may be challenged with lags between stages of workflow. I mean, again, I love to pick on the utilities only because I've spent 30 years in them, but we're not doing very good. We have lags of weeks and months between transitions of states of data. That's just not okay. And that's why it's a crisis, frankly. Data management, if any of you all love data quality problems, please sign up and help the utility, because we got massive problems there. And there's good reasons for it. God love them. They're my customers, and we've been trying to fix it for a long time. But it's an administrative human being problem fundamentally. But I really believe on this third point here, where data gaps are incrementally addressed. I mean, that could be the ultimate saving grace, because as we build that GeoAI model and begin to incorporate the rules and gaps, AI is very good at saying this doesn't fit, this doesn't fit, this doesn't fit. And we can either close it with logical assumptions, we can close it with human in the loop, we can close it with increasing repeatability. I mean, we can close it and the machine won't quit. The machine doesn't get tired. It keeps looking. So I really believe that in some of these complex areas, agentic AI is going to be able to increase our data quality as we apply the workflow tools, as we re-engineer the work and put agentic AI in as the workflow tool itself. And then ultimately, it's all about the human in the loop. It's the whole reason the thing exists. And so we can't forget that the people are the reason it's here. The service that our department, our entity, who we work for, what we do is for, that service is ultimately what we want to enhance and optimize through these kinds of tools and technologies. And the human is still the driver of that, the recipient of that, and the benefactor of a good mix between the agentic AI workflow and the system of record. Just the last slide I have here is a it's an eye chart a little bit. I apologize for that. But I really like the kind of the checklist mindset here, AI governance and control. We got runtime and agents at the top of this. Whoops, sorry. Let's see if I can get back to that. I was going to bring a cursor over here, but I don't know if you can see that. But this is runtime and agents. This is prompt and content safety. This is access and identity. This is data protection, monitoring and compliance, and AI consumers. So, and then the details on the edge. So, I think Steve's going to talk a little bit more about enterprise policies and that type of thing. So, it's kind of assumed that the right people are taken care to enforce the right standards so it's safe and compliant for all the right reasons. So I think that's the end that I've got my presentation. Tracy, and I'll give the screen back to you.
Great. Thanks. Holy smokes, I have questions. Many questions. Yeah, but Steve, can you share your screen and give us more insight?
Sure. Give me 1 second here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everybody see that okay?
Yes.
So looks good? Okay, good. Thumbs up. Great. So hello, everybody. I'm here to Sonoma County, California, and just talk a little bit about what we went through to design our policy here. So just real quickly, there we go. Real quick about me, I'm the Assistant Information Systems Director. I have been with the county for 8 years. I've been in IT, cybersecurity, and technology in general for over 20 years, and I've worked for both the local government and banking sector, so I have some of both of those. And then I'm the one who led the development of the AI policy, and so Tim Pudoff, who's on this call, came to me and talked to me the other day about this, and that's why I'm here. So just figured talk to you a little bit about what we did. I also designed the governance framework and then kind of the due diligence process, and some of that kind of comes from the banking days, although I didn't have AI as much back in the banking days, but the risk management side and stuff. For those of you who don't know where Sonoma County is, we're in Santa Rosa, our headquarters in Santa Rosa. We're about an hour and a half north of San Francisco, and I will say, I don't know if you saw on the front slide, but I did use AI to help me generate this presentation, and AI is the one that actually put those coordinates in here. So I didn't think about that, but AI is pretty cool. I told him I was presenting for GIS, and it on its own put in the coordinates, which I thought was pretty creative. And then the county, we have about 485,000 residents, and then within the county, 29 departments and 4,400 employees roughly. And within our department, we have 120 employees that support roughly $5,000 desktops and hundreds of apps. And I'm getting into some of this because it's a little relevant in the process for getting a policy approved, especially in government. And so just kind of the process that we went through here at the county is this is probably late 2023, early 2024, right around the time, right after ChatGPT just exploded, and nobody was prepared for this, at least not anybody that we were talking to with county, cities, and so on. But it was a big talk. Everybody, we go to different conferences and stuff, and in AI, it's still a big conversation, obviously, but back then it was even bigger because nobody had policies, nobody had guidelines, nobody had anything. There were a few people talking about policies, and there were some people who had some kind of do's and don'ts, but nothing really formal. And then it was on my radar, but it kind of became top priority, honestly, for one of our board members. And so then it became top priority for us. And so I had initially decided to try to go through and just create guidelines, because guidelines are much faster. Normally a policy could take a couple of years to do, and I'll walk through the process, but it's a very involved process. And so I was hoping we could start off with guidelines and get those out within a few weeks or months at most. And as I started going through the process and working with our council and HR and others, it became very relevant. We need to do a policy more around enforcement, something that basically ensured that people wouldn't use technologies that weren't approved, or wouldn't accidentally enter confidential data in a system that would, then use our data to train the models or share the data in other ways. And so that kind of changed the focus. And so then I started working on a policy. And I also used AI during this process. I'm like, AI, generate me some guidelines, generate a policy. And it took a ton of iterations. So you don't just tell it to do it and then you're done. You have to actually read it and, still go back and forth with the AI and then modify it on your own. As I did with this presentation, I didn't just plug stuff in and have it generate. I had to go back and through 30 iterations or more and then still manually do stuff. So just became a lot bigger, and working in the government, whenever at least within, actually I would say most, but at least here, whenever you do a policy that actually has consequences and enforcement, you have to go through the meet and confer process with your labor unions. And so I met with all of our 11 labor unions, and it also requires a board approval, which again can take time. So that's why I was hoping for guidelines. But it actually turned out that most people were very supportive of going the policy route, because it defined what was acceptable, what was not for employees. It addressed some of the legal and other risks. So HR risk, our risk department, county council, and the board, all extremely supportive, which was critical. Not all departments were supportive. Not everybody wanted enforcement. Not everybody wanted clear guidelines. They just kind of wanted, some kind of wanted that flexibility to do some, to not have those guardrails. So I was met with kind of a mixed appetite, but HR, council, and the board, they were supportive, and that was really the most important thing. Since we were doing a policy instead of guidelines, one of the goals was to make sure that the policy was written in a way that it could handle evolving AI technology. At the time, agentic AI it might have been around, but it wasn't as big of a deal. It wasn't as widely known. It was really, ChatGPT was really the big one. And so just, LLMs and those kinds of things, which are risky, but not quite as risky. But it needed to make sure it covered all forms of AI. So I think it turned out pretty well, but you all can read and decide for yourselves. But those were some of the kind of the goals and some of the key things that we went through. It was adopted in 2024, did go through the whole process. So kind of started with one thing and ended with another. It took 9 months to do. Some policies, take a couple of years. In the private sector, in the banking sector, 9 months would have been forever. It would have had this done in a few weeks, maybe a month, but it is a lot more of a process in the public sector, meeting with unions, getting a lot of input, and kind of waiting for things to, people to have their input and so on and so forth. So, but it actually turned out to be much faster than I expected, although still longer than I would have liked, especially coming from the private sector. Some of the key elements in the policy that what are the key things employees need to know, and what did we really focus on that kind of helped this be able to handle newer technologies. Like I said, and now there's agentic AI, and there's AI glasses, and there's all kinds of stuff that were not in place or as well known back then. But some of the things that were really critical then and now and going forward was that we wanted to make sure that AI did not make any decisions. So this is all policy. This is administrative control, not necessarily the technical controls, but in the policy, big factor is it cannot make decisions. Things like rating employee applications or scoring RFPs, and not just making decisions, but narrowing down options. It can be used to provide information and things to look at, but not necessarily upload a whole bunch of employee applications, say, tell me, just narrow down the top 10, top 5, because there is a lot of bias in it. And you don't know, that bias could sway one or the other, one way or the other. And same with RFPs. If AI is programmed in a way to look for certain things, it could skew, a proposal to one vendor over another. And so it can be used to evaluate and provide feedback, but not narrow down, not make a decision. The next one was AI needs to be used for ethical and lawful purposes. And although that does sound like common sense, this is where that policy versus guidelines comes in to make sure that something's enforceable. If an employee or manager, anybody uses this for something unethical, we need to be able to take some action. So it can't be used to create malware. Again, common sense, but somebody might do it. Another big thing, especially on the lawful side, and it was really big back then, it's still a consideration now, but some technologies come a long way, is in California, there's it's a two-party consent laws when it comes to recording conversations without consent, and that includes transcriptions and stuff. And there were some technologies, Otter AI, one example, from back then. I think it's come a long way since then. But, people would just join meetings and their AI agent would join the meeting and start recording it and didn't disclose it to anybody. That's against the law in California. So we wanted to make sure that we address some of that. Although it is against the law, we needed to point that out to employees as well. Also, AI cannot be used to substitute any kind of licensed professional. So it can't be used in place of an attorney, in place of an engineer, in place of, medical. Some of that sounds kind of common sense, but at the same time, it was being done in the world, and hopefully not here, but in the world, even attorneys were using AI to, not our attorneys, but attorneys out there were using AI to generate, their court filings or their court. I'm not an attorney, so I don't know the proper term, but AI would create fake court cases and they would add it in there, and fake references, and attorneys have been disbarred. Also somewhat recently in the news, I had read that somebody was using AI as kind of for legal advice, and they were trying to claim that conversation with the AI was covered under attorney-client privilege. The judge ruled that it wasn't, and so now, their prompts and stuff were subject to, disclosure and such. So also it is against, I'm told that it is against the law to use certain, to replace, like you wouldn't want AI to check your plans, for example. I don't, our counsel wanted that in there, and they referenced being against law. I don't know against what laws, but long story short, it can't be used as a substitute for those things. All outputs have to be reviewed by a human. As you can see at the very bottom, that caution, that's basically the number one thing, is that use AI for a lot of different things, but you have to validate it. I will tell you that the accuracy early on especially was horrible. I mean, it could help you write something, but if you ask it to do some research, it was absolutely horrible. Nowadays, it's much better, but it's still not 100% accurate. There's also bias in AI, and that's another reason why it needs to be reviewed by a person. And another one is copyright. If it's generating content that is similar to, or almost exactly or similar to something that somebody owns, those are just some risks. So while we wouldn't necessarily know if something's copyright falls under that or not, there's another protection which we'll get into in the next screen or so. But those are the reasons why. Also disclose when AI significantly contributed to work. As I put that comment up front that this presentation was partially generated by AI, may necessarily, you don't have to put that in an email every time you use AI, but if you're using something and trying to pass it off on your own, that's really where the concerns come in, especially if it's something public facing. And then as a reminder to employees to keep things professional in the public sector, California specifically, there is the California Public Records Act. And so prompts or outputs might be subject to disclosure, not only through public records, but legal disclosure and so on and so forth. So just a good reminder to employees. So these are just some of the key things for employees to remember within our policy. And then as far as what we do to evaluate our new AI and stuff like that, and if there's time at the end, I'll show kind of a little bit of that process. But whenever we, so number one, we have a policy that defines kind of some guardrails within the policy, how we get through what AI are we allowed to use and not use. The policy says that it must be that all AI must be reviewed. AI technologies and use cases must be reviewed and approved by our information security officer and county council. So I kind of work with council and kind of with my background in risk management to develop a risk assessment that does some of these things. And so this is kind of some of the key factors that we use when we're evaluating new technologies and how it can be used. Both of them are combined. So the first question is, what kind of data will it access? Is it confidential, internal, or public? Because depending on the data type, one technology might be acceptable for public, as you'll see if you look at some of our documentation, and others can be used with up to confidential information. So it all depends on the controls they have in place. Will our data be used to train AI models? This is still huge, but when ChatGPT first came out and some of the other AI technologies that exploded, especially the consumer versions, would use customer or consumer data to train their models. It was very popular. It's since become a little less popular, especially with business and enterprise technologies. It doesn't do that quite as much, but consumer version still happens with Copilot and other things. You have to opt out most of the time, and sometimes, if you're using like something that's through a web browser and you don't sign in, it's almost certainly using anything you type in there to train their models. But from commercial products with our data, it's pretty much not allowed. Like I can't think of, it's not explicitly designed, but I have not run across anything where we've allowed it. And then will our data be shared or disclosed with others? And so if our data is used to train the model, of course it could be shared through because it's now part of that model. So that's number two, kind of covers some of that. But it also includes if you have AI that's like, for example, we are actively creating an AI chatbot kind of a thing for our justice platform. Our justice platform is used by district attorney, public defender, sheriff, and so on. And so we want to make sure that, each party can use that chatbot to get information, but we all want to make sure they can only get information that they should have access to. So consider public defender and district attorney. A lot of their data needs to be kept separate. And so we want to make sure that the AI will follow the user permissions and not accidentally disclose stuff that it shouldn't. And so the good thing is a lot of the AI models use user delegated permission. So basically it accesses what the user has access to, but not all. This is something we have to look for. And then when we look at products, do we retain ownership of our inputs? There are some AI vendors out there that will assume ownership of anything you type. That's not acceptable to us. We want to make sure that we don't lose ownership, type or upload, by the way. And then do we own AI generated outputs? Another factor, if we're using AI to generate images or text or anything for that matter, we want to make sure that we own that so we can use it and not get sued. Which kind of leads to the last one. And this is actually very common now. Not all vendors are willing to do this, but most are. And if they don't, we won't use them, is will the vendor indemnify the county for all AI generated content? So again, we use AI to generate images, for example. We use that images to post online. We want to make sure that if somebody says that image looks exactly like our image and we've got a copyright, we want the vendor to fight that battle for us in court. And so that's pretty common for that indemnity clause. It's a requirement for us, but thankfully it has become more common because, a lot of AI, especially Gen AI, generative AI specifically, that generates content. It's just become more common, which is great. And that kind of leads to, we look at all of these factors on the previous slide, but that's only part of it. We also want to make sure that all of those things are defined in the contracts. And even in RFPs, we put some verbiage in our RFPs because AI is now everywhere. Even if it's not there now in a product that you purchase, it's going to be there almost certainly. So we want to make sure that we talk about it in the RFP process, what our requirements are. And then when we look at a contract, we want to make sure that there's verbiage in there. And so on the previous side, who owns the data, those kinds of, we want that explicitly in the contract. Our AI will not use your data to train our models. We do not share your content with anybody. All of that stuff and the indemnification, of course, has to be in the contract. And like I said, today they might not have AI, but they might next year. And you need to be prepared for that future when people add AI to their products. And kind of on that note, we have some vendors who use one product today. What if they change products tomorrow? ChatGPT it's a big one used today. Now there's Claude. Now there's other things. So we want to make sure that we know if a vendor's changing their AI product and that that we're notified and that we have the ability to vet that AI and opt out if it doesn't meet our requirements. I kind of talked already about the RFP, just signaling up front that we have requirements so that way somebody doesn't apply with, like DeepSeek AI from China and not understand what we're really looking for, that we probably won't accept that because we have standards. And as part of the RFP process, we don't necessarily make them go through every person submitting an RFP up front to go through our due diligence process, but we just let people know that there is a due diligence process and then we go through that before signing the contract. So we have a process that goes through, like minimum standards. Then we make sure that those standards are documented in writing, preferably in a contract, something binding, not just the terms. And then we're pretty comfortable at that point. And so where are we now? Well, we've got 28 AI technologies formally approved. And we're very pro AI, by the way. We just want to make sure that we use technologies that are going to keep our data secure, that aren't going to steal it, all of the stuff we talked about already. And we even have the ability to use AI with confidential and regulated data. And I think I have a few minutes at the end. I'll show you a couple of those. I will say within the past month, we started off kind of slow with, we would approve technologies, but try to keep it around public information only, at least at first. But now things have come a long way. A month ago, we actually just redid the whole approval process and reevaluate our approved technologies and allowed them to be used much more broad than we ever had. We kind of kept the scope limited at first too, just to make sure we didn't miss anything. But now we've come such a long way and AI's come a long way that we've made it much more broad. Pretty much people can use AI for almost anything within those guardrails that we've already set. Validating and all of those different things. We also have the Microsoft 365 G5 license for our email and so on. That comes with the version of Microsoft Copilot. It's not the Copilot that's integrated with Word and Excel, but it is a chat, kind of a secure chatbot. And the good thing is that it's included with our license. It's in all the data that everything people type is incorporated within our tenant. So it's not sharing it with anybody. So it's extremely secure. And it's included with our license. So that covers a lot of everyday use. We are getting ready to do a big push on that in the coming weeks. We're going to hold some internal town halls. We've had this for a while, but again, just in the past month, we've really expanded what people can use, and now we're going to share that with everybody. One challenge we have is that we are, as you saw up front, 29 different departments. We have an enterprise policy that's got guardrails, but somewhat relaxed. Well, not every department is as comfortable. Some deal with highly confidential information. So while we do have an enterprise policy. Departments might have a separate policy that restricts the use a little bit more. So that's where some of these town halls are going to come into place to kind of show people how they can use it, but also remind them follow any department policy. So that's another challenge with rolling out AI with 29 departments. So another thing that we currently use, not for everybody because it's expensive, is the paid version. So you've got the Copilot chat that's included with our G5, but then we also have a paid version. It's about $30 per user per month, as you can see. That's why we don't have it for all employees. But that's the version that integrates with Word, Excel, and so on. Personally, I don't think the quality is quite there at this point. We're also in the government cloud, not enterprise cloud. So our AI models are usually 6, 9, 12 months behind the private sector in enterprise. And so some of that could be related to that. I will say Teams Premium, though, works excellent, does a great job recapping meetings. So, and that one's only like $2 per user per month. So that one's definitely worth it. We don't have it for everybody, but it's a great product. We also have ChatGPT and Claude, but those are paid versions. And if you've gone through trying to purchase, Claude, ChatGPT, those kinds of things, big challenge we have here is that a lot of those you have to pay by credit card and you can't pay by invoice. The enterprise versions you can, but we haven't been able to get a quote for Claude, and we've been trying for 3 months. I don't think we're big enough for them. ChatGPT we can, but there's some other challenges there. So long story short, public sector usually have some guidelines on purchasing software on credit cards, and you can't put 1,000 licenses on a credit card where they're paid monthly. The limits aren't there. So that we have some challenges around procurement, but ChatGPT and Claude are still pretty good products, and we're being used. So Sensing and Azure AI, these are kind of interesting. Like I mentioned earlier, that we're rolling out AI with our justice platform. So Sensing is one element that's kind of around identity resolution, kind of looking at different identities across different systems and linking them in some fashion. And then Azure AI is around the chatbot. All of these are accessible. You can use them with criminal justice information, which is highly regulated, and they are. I would say they're not DOJ approved in per se, in the sense that DOJ does not approve AI technologies. They just approve the environment and the controls. They don't care about AI. In fact, they don't have any guidance on AI the last time I talked to them. But they can be used as long as the environment is approved, which it is. So they are approved. They are DOJ approved for use, but not explicitly, if that makes sense. And then we also have the Esri AI products. AI assistant. We have a whole bunch more. I said 28 of them out there, but these are just some high level examples. I'm trying to be cognizant of time, so apologize if I'm pushing it now. So what are the next steps for us? I've kind of mentioned that Copilot, we've had it for quite a while, but we haven't really pushed it hard because we're honestly how do we train people how to do it? How do we support it? And we weren't quite ready for that. I don't know if we're still quite ready for that, but it's time. We need to move forward and start really kind of getting it out there in people's hands, and letting them know it's already available to them, but letting them know how to use it a little more. And we're also going to start holding some town halls internally, kind of town halls where we just kind of, people can sign up and we just go over some of the AI products, how to use them, and encourage them and listen, because it's always nice to hear what people, how are they using them and stuff like that, and any challenges they have. Agentic AI is on our radar. And so this is something, Claude Co-work is kind of, in a sense, one form of that. We're testing Claude right now. It's not formally approved yet. The chat portion is much more in line with ChatGPT, but the co-work element, where you install an agent, that's the part that we're still testing. I think from a security side, it's looking pretty promising, but this is new territory for us. It's also, with Agentic AI in particular, very supportive of it, and I think it could be very cool, but we have to be cognizant on how does it impact jobs? How could it impact, employees? If it gets to a point that it could start taking over jobs, then there's labor union considerations. Personally, I don't see that happening anytime soon because local governments have much more work than we can handle. So even adding AI to that will help us do it without impacting jobs as much, at least in the short term, in my opinion. And that's kind of number 4. We've also started just using AI for some coding, to help our coders, programmers and stuff like that. So we're pushing that out as well. And then just some kind of recently in the news, as I was preparing this, some things one of them was last month, but Governor Newsom signed an executive order on kind of AI workforce disruption. So it's really I'm not an expert in this area, but it's really around, instructing state agencies to start evaluating what they can do to prepare for mass layoffs within the private sector more than anything, because we're seeing that in the tech, in Silicon Valley, people being laid off. And kind of on a similar note, China, which surprised me, but Chinese court ruled that companies can't terminate employees just to replace them with AI. So I found that one kind of interesting, and I'm kind of wondering, what's going to happen in California or the U.S. as a result of that. So time will tell, but those are just some interesting things that came up. And kind of, and I guess there's the questions here. We'll do questions after, but if you get a copy of our AI policy, I'm actually going to, I'll show you in just a second, but the best way to do is just Google Sonoma County AI policy. I think that's the best way to go. I was going to put a link, but it was way too long, and I've got one QR code for this risk assessment template. But in addition to our policies, we have on the same page, there's a link to our kind of the technologies approved and use cases. And then I also have a link here, which is the QR code to the risk assessment template that we use. And then my LinkedIn, if you want to get a hold of me, you can also, Tim Pudoff can if you have other questions and stuff. But I'm going to stop this for 1 second and just quickly show you our policy. So you can see our policy out here, not that I'm going to go through all of that, but the AI technologies use and restrictions. This is the list of all of our technologies, what's approved, what we're currently evaluating, which is actually more than this, and then what we've evaluated and have denied for whatever reason. And along with that comes the use case. How can you use it? What kind of data can you use it for? Any other considerations, any restrictions, like you can use it, but not for these things, those kinds of things. And then at the bottom, I just moved this to tab so I could move quickly, is kind of a matrix of the technology with the type of data you can use it with. And so you can see there's quite a bit that can be used with confidential, which includes PII, not necessarily PHI, public health or criminal justice, but we do have a couple technologies you can use with PHI, not to make medical decisions, of course, but just if you were to do some analytics or something, and then criminal justice information as well. And then just last thing, super quick, the risk assessment, I won't have time to go through this whole thing, but just so you could see, we've got, this, it's an Excel sheet, it's an overall assessment around, and this is one we use for ArcGIS, around technology. So it's a kind of a vendor, cybersecurity, business continuity risk assessment, and AI risk assessment. So it asks those basic questions, will it be used for ethical purposes, and kind of some of the basic stuff. And then we kind of get into some of the risks around that, and then the controls around that, which are around show me the actual evidence of in the contracts and stuff like that. So I think I'm probably about time, so I'm going to stop sharing, but I think we'll have questions in a minute if anybody has anything for me, but hopefully that was informative. All right.
Very informative, and do have questions, and there I see a bunch in the chat for you and Dan. Right now we've got a poll. Tracy's gonna, I think, turn on a poll real quick. and just like 3 questions. Um, just while we're kind of organizing questions for hopefully answers. Um, and then we'll give that a little bit. Um, and then I'm thinking I'll just look over if there's just kind of use a raised hand. And if y'all have any questions, let me put my share my screen because this is the officially the questions and answers section. If anybody has,
Hey, Marcus,
yes,
this is Donna. There's a question.
Donna.
Yeah, hi. Hey, this is Donna with California Tribal GIS. There's a question there for Steve. It says, when it comes to professional use of AI tools, geo, AI, spatial machine learning, etc., how can the control of the tools and methodologies remain with the professionals rather than being shifted to IT? Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what that means. I'll answer what I think, and then maybe if it's not doesn't answer, you could be kind of you can let me know. But so here, what we do is we evaluate the security around the tools and the contract language to make sure that those both meet the requirements. If it meets those requirements and how it will be used. So if somebody says, for example, I want to use this, let's just say ChatGPT to write emails. Great, that's not a problem. I want to use ChatGPT to give me medical advice. Okay, that's a problem. So that's why we look at use cases. And that's why we define the use cases so it's very clear. But if it checks those boxes and it meets those requirements, and we've kind of become pretty flexible on the use cases, as long as it's within those guardrails. Once that's done, we kind of take a step back and our employees and departments use it how they're going to use it, as long as they fall within that parameter. If they need to have the parameter changed, they come back to us and we reevaluate. But we don't necessarily get involved with managing. I mean, if it's something we can manage, like the user who has access to it, sometimes we can, like with Copilot, we can manage who gets a license, for example. With ChatGPT, it becomes harder because the subscriptions, we can't purchase enterprise subscriptions on a credit card, and that's a procurement challenge that we have. So outside of controlling who has access, which sometimes we can, sometimes we can't, we don't really get involved beyond that unless somebody comes back to us for another use case or for just some assistance. Does that answer your question, or am I off base there?
Steve, that was my question, and thank you, Donna, for raising it. I work with the County of Orange, and our GIS people, they're not part of IT, so a lot of times, especially with geospatial AI, that's becoming a problem because for me, I'm a scientist. I know the implications of using AI. I understand what the AI and the machine learning tools do, and I understand the data and the maps it produces. And that's combined with my other question is that because we create public service and those services are subject to Freedom of Information Act and public liability, it is important for us to have control over how the tools are used, what kind of products are created from that, because the IT professionals often do not understand the data impacts and the science behind those tools. And that was my question. There is a tendency for IT to do that by themselves and not consult us. And that was my question. Do you actually consider the geospatial professionals when you make those decisions?
Yeah, and typically what happens is we get requests from departments and people, and so they tell us how they're going to use that, and we just make sure it falls within the guardrails. Stuff like Claude and ChatGPT, we try to be a little proactive on what we can. It takes a lot of work to do some of this. We're actually looking at Claude to see if they can help us do some of the assessments for us, and then we would review them. But usually the requests come from an employee or department, and they tell us how they're going to use it. But yeah, I know not all IT departments run like this, but right now anyway, we're going to get a new director in December. But at least right now, with me and the current director, we're not business people. We don't know all of that. So we're IT people. So we just look at the security and compliance piece of it. The rest of it, we want to get out of people's way, but we do want them to know how to use it responsibly. And so that's what our role is to review the technology, make sure it's secure, make sure all of that, and then tell them the guardrails, and then go for it. You use it how it's going to help you with your job. Sorry, talk a little bit there. Hopefully it helps though.
See, in the chat, Andrea, you had a question for Dan. Look like.
So Dan alluded to it briefly. He mentioned like a little bit of the ethical, I think, environmental impacts of AI. So I was just curious, as local government, what you guys think what role we play in integrating AI so that we're not behind, but also trying to make sure that it's done in an ethical manner. Because like for us, we're in the county of Riverside. A lot of our area is very agricultural based. Coachella Valley is currently being considered for one of the larger data mining centers in the state of California, and it's already a drought prone area. So it's like it's just like warehouses, right? We're the consumers, we keep wanting to consume, so they're going to need to build more warehouses. Now with AI, the more we use it, the more data centers are going to be needed. But I'm just curious. Different.
No, I mean, I think Steve's the man here in terms of trying to govern this stuff a little bit more than I'm on the side trying to, unfortunately, promote it because I see the value in it. So you've kind of got these two perspectives. One says, go, go, go. And even I think, Steve, to quote what you said, you're seeing the value as well. That's kind of the problem we've got, Andrea, is it just seems to work. And yet it does require these massive data centers, which in turn drives, at least in the utility industry, a lot of demand, which is increasing the need for it. So, I don't know how it's got to be a local government solution for your land use stuff, and I think working at the local government roots is the way to protect your area from its impact in that regard.
Yeah, and I will say it is a difficult one because, and we're not using it like for everything, and we are mindful of the impacts to the environment and to employees. So I think we're not all in where we're going to replace all employees with it and that, of course, but at the same time, we are mindful. I know there's this big thing going on in Mississippi. I think it's Mississippi or Missouri. I think it's Mississippi, where the city council or whoever, everybody was voted out because they decided to bring in a data center. I will say that the impacts, not only those impacts, and of course water and other things that go along with it, but AI is driving up the price of equipment. We're seeing that too. So yeah, it's that double-edged sword. How do you use it? Because it does provide value, but at the same time, there's some downsides, and I don't have the answers to that other than I wouldn't want a data center in my backyard, so I would try to vote against that. But yeah, it's a tough one. Don't have an answer.
Hey, Michael, you have a chat or in chat. You have a question for Dan? Come up. I can read it, or you can read it.
Yeah, on Dan, on your demo, I'm just curious, how have you found agentic AI to work with reading deeds that might be of poor quality, or integrating that if it is able to read it into neighboring parcel data, for example, that may not be up to the same standard as what was just produced by the AI. I mean, I still think the human's going to be better at that than an AI. And maybe once you've converted your parcel base to 100% survey, then yeah, I could see it. But we have a almost 190,000 parcels, and we're a long way from that. So I'm curious what your success
Yeah.
or what your experience of that has been.
That's a great question. I appreciate you asking it, Michael. I mean, it's sort of your idea of fitting it to the other parcels is one we all wrestle with. Whether we call it rubber sheeting or best fit or conflation or what have you, and that there are tools for that. But I think the way we would see it in the context in the paradigm that I laid out was you would have the AI platform generate constantly the polygon sources and place them. And then you, as the human in the loop, would go through and make the adjustments that you saw best. So you kind of blend the two. You don't want to say, we're not going to use it because it doesn't do everything for us. Rather, you might say, we're going to use it where it makes sense. And that's kind of the idea of re-engineering the workflow so that you can take the advantages it provides, but not overpromise or oversell the solution, because that is not what it is. It's very clearly short in many areas. And so you just kind of deconstruct your workflow to be these things we're going to do through agentic AI, and these things we're going to remain as a human in the loop oversight workflow area. Is kind of how I'd skin that one, if that makes sense.
It does. Thanks.
So I don't see other questions, but I have a plethora. I've been noting them down. Kind of joining the two, Steve, with kind of Dan's agentic AI tools to convert a deed to lines and polygons. Is that covered in your policy or the tools, or is it more for LLM type stuff?
Well, we would have to do a review of that through that due diligence process, but our policy would allow if it meets the due diligence requirements. So yeah, and something like that. I mean, I'd have to know the specifics. We have a process, like you saw the Excel sheet, but there's a path forward from that on our side. I will tell you, cost is the biggest factor for a lot of things because everybody's tight, budgets are tight. So that, and then making sure that it has all those check boxes. Like I said, does it use our data to train them? Do we own all of those different things? Can a human review the output? So yeah, our policy would allow for it, but we'd have to go through the process, like through that Excel sheet to get it approved. But there's a path forward.
So it's just like using any tool that any AI tool. Like it seems like there's little fuzzy AI tools where it's just a little bit like formatting just a document or something, or putting information in. Seems like it's a kind of gray area with how much AI is used.
It's another interesting too, because everybody's calling their tools AI now. Whether it's true AI or not, I don't know. It's an algorithm. Is an algorithm AI? I mean, it could be. We actually went through that with something that I didn't really see it as AI, but they called it AI, so we kind of had to go through the process of evaluating it. But from where I sit, if it checks those boxes, and a lot of AI does now, if it's going to keep our data secure, we don't really. Well, if it's used within the guardrails, like I said, we care what it's going to be used for, but as long as it's within that guardrail, there's a path forward for us. It's just a matter of, can we afford it? It's going to impact, jobs or other things. Those are other factors, but we're pretty open to exploring it. We just want to do it. We just want to review it first. We want to understand it and make sure it checks those security and compliance boxes. But everything's on the table for us to review, not to approve, but for us to review.
I see Costas. You have a question in the chat.
Yeah, I was wondering, listening to both of you, I was wondering if you would find it useful for an organization as ours, as CGIA, to provide and work on some AI policy guidance, at least in relation to GIS technologies, that can be approved and supported by our members. With that, because I can see right now it's very fragmented. Every organization, every public agency tries their own policies, but there might be a need to harmonize and align all those policies together, at least for California. Would a policy guidance help? Is that something that we can do that can help you guys and also help all of us to harmonize our policies?
Yeah, I think one of the areas, where a lot of Steve's policy focus on are um, commercially available, publicly available platforms. Although it sounds like, Steve, you've gotten into some private vendor stuff as well. Um, there's a whole nother area of this where the guardrails can be built for the protection of the entity that's building it. And it can be closed loop guardrails wherein the input and the results stay in the proprietary systems of the agency. So and I don't know, Steve, if you've gotten into that piece of it yet or not. Um, but that frees a lot of the risk associated with data exchange issues associated with security. So to your point, Costas, I think it seems like a really good thing for CGI to do, simply because it is truly groundbreaking, and each and every week we go through is new discovery.
Donna, I see hand raised.
Yes, hi, Steve. Yeah, I like the process that Sonoma has been going through in regards to policy development. And so I just wanted to comment that I think a lot of this could also apply to tribal governments in California, and probably be starting to draft out some things to share with the tribes in regards to your presentation. Appreciate that very much. Also was curious, Steve, do you guys also look at and evaluate Google Gemini AI? I was just curious. I know you had like 20 something that you've been looking at apps.
It's on our list of things to do. I think it's listed under currently in process, but I have to say it's been out there for about 6 months or so, because we just kind of keep getting hammered with other ones. And I think there was another question I saw about how do we I can't remember if it's
benchmark. That was one of my questions.
Benchmark, yeah. I would say kind of where we are at this moment is it takes a lot of time to do the due diligence, and so every time somebody asks for something, we have to evaluate is the level of effort worth it. If one person wants it, is it worth all that time spent? And that's the hard part. So that's part that, and with Google Gemini, it's I'm sure some people are using it. The challenge is at what point do we say we've got enough and just try to point people to where we are? We're still going to do Google Gemini because it's one of the big ones, but we have Copilots as included with our license. And so when do we say, hey, you know what, this is just our standard, use this one, and then we'll look at some one-offs for like that's not going to work for GIS, so we'd look for something else for GIS. But for like the most part, there's a million of them out there. We just can't support all of them because their terms change and everything changes, and it's just like we need to. So we're not there yet, but I think we're almost there. But we are gonna look at Gemini anyway.
Just curious. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, and I don't know if that kind of answers that benchmark question or not, but that's kind of our approach.
No, absolutely, Steve. This is Jay, and thank you for the insightful session, both by you and Dan. First, it's amazing. Hats off to you and your team for being so ahead. Honestly, I've been working on the regulated industry you seem to be really ahead of the game in terms of embracing AI within an organization. So I appreciate that. Question for Dan. How does he see between the hype and the real use cases, especially in the industry that you referenced, the utilities industry? How is this agentic AI or in general AI is being embraced in the day-to-day workflow to produce a meaningful outcome, right? But yeah, so I think just curious, what's his experience
I
so
mean,
far?
Jay, it's a great question. It's very, very slow. It's and I'm not sure I think I can guess in terms of some of the reasons why. But the work that the utility does, well, let's just pick on an electric utility, but it's no different really from some of the others, and design, build, operate, maintain, construct, complex networks. They haven't embraced the agents to do the work very well at all. It's all superficial, periphery kinds of AI uses, documents and good stuff, but not in the core of the business. I guess that'll change, but there's some human reluctance of the people that do the work that they don't want it necessarily. There's not a good profit motive in a lot of our regulated industries, and so there's never a driver to really do anything particularly quickly so it's kind of not moving. And yet leadership, I think there's a great desire for leadership to take advantage of it because the backlogs are huge in utilities, and it seems like there's a fit there. So it's an interesting conundrum. I spend time going to conferences, and I always look and talk and talk and talk. And there's some ideas it's going to get to the control rooms, and but it's not there yet anywhere.
Thank you, Dan. Quite an irony that AI data centers needs the power that utilities is feeding, and they are kind of hand in glove. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
So I think we're
There's
getting
one
close.
more question in the chat, Marcus, from Michael Hansen.
Yes, and then there's a closing poll. So I think, Tracy, can you open up the closing poll? And Michael.
Yes, can you let Michael ask his one last question?
Yes, absolutely. Michael, please.
In the chat.
Hi, Steve. Yeah, my question was, when you mentioned that indemnity clause, I'm curious how much pushback you've gotten on that, because I can imagine there are some AI content releases that can be very, very expensive. So I'm kind of surprised anybody's even agreed to that.
Surprisingly, very little pushback because most generative AI vendors, and I'm not an generative AI model expert, but they generate the content in a way that makes it unique enough. And again, I'm not as an attorney, so I'm paraphrasing, to meet the legal definition of that it's different enough, I guess, to where they can't get sued. So I think if you try to generate some images and stuff, you'll find that they're slightly different. Each one's slightly different. And so I'm not an attorney, but I've been shocked how many people will indemnify us. In fact, in ChatGPT, all of the big names do it automatically. Where we do have some struggles is if we're working with a vendor on a product, it doesn't even matter what it is, and they're integrated with AI. So they're integrated with ChatGPT. Our contract is with the vendor, not with ChatGPT, and that vendor doesn't always want to indemnify us against that, the generated content claim, even though they are indemnified by ChatGPT. So that we get some pushback on that, but we push back as well because we're not going to do buy a product that doesn't have that. If it generates content, we want to be indemnified. And sometimes there's AI that is not generative AI, or it's reviewing body cam footage, for example. This is, it does a transcription of body cam footage. That's one example. That vendor does indemnify us, but this is just an example. So in that particular case, it's doing a transcription. It's not actually generating content that somebody's going to claim as a copyright. So in those cases, we have a little flexibility. But if it's generating any kind of content that we might be sued against, we demand indemnification, and the reputable vendors do that. So it's been pretty nice, actually.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm just surprised. I watch enough YouTube that I've seen some of these AI facial recognition software identify people and they're falsely arrested, and then you're into civil rights violations, and some of those can get expensive. So I'm just was shocked that so many people were agreeing to be to the indemnification clause. So that kind of surprised me. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I should clarify. We're focused on generated content indemnification over that, not over that kind of stuff. So totally agree on that one, though.
Great. I think, Tracy, is there a closing poll? Just like magic like that. Oh, this only has one question. This was an easy one. So I want to, with that, I think we're pretty close. Thank our sustaining members: California Tribal GIS, Dewberry, Diglert, City of Merced, Parcel Quest, Quartic, Redefined Horizons, Shasta College GIS, UC Santa Barbara, USAN 811, and USC their Spatial Sciences Institute. Wait for this. Hold close, Steve and Dan. Thank you so much. I still have like 48 questions, but we're running out of time. Any comments or anything?
Great pleasure to be here.
Same here.
Thank you so
for
much,
having me.
Dan and Steve.
Our pleasure.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Hope you all have a great day and great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Thanks. Okay. Bye. Is stop sharing. And I will. Stop recording.